Welcome to True You College Admissions, a conversation about transforming the college planning and application process so that it truly serves long-term success and well-being of students. My name is Angela Mazel. I am a former Princeton University interviewer, TED Talk speaker, and founder of Anja Education Consultants. I am also the very proud mom of a thriving 24-year-old now in grad school. At Anja Education, our mission is to guide students to college, not as an end in itself, but as one step in designing a life of purpose, well-being, and prosperity. We are thrilled to have as our guest today, Dr. Denise Pope. She is a senior lecturer at Stanford University, author, and co-founder of Challenge Success, a nonprofit that offers schools and families research-based strategies for a healthier, more authentic path to success in the 21st century. Her work focuses on academic stress and its consequences for students' mental and physical health, engagement with learning, and integrity. She is the author of the award-winning book, Doing School: How We Are Creating a Generation of Stressed Out, Materialistic, and Miseducated Students. She also co-authored Overloaded and Underprepared, Strategies for Stronger Schools and Healthy, Successful Kids. Dr. Pope co-hosts the podcast Schools In. Denise, thank you so much for being with us today and to help us launch this podcast. I have admired your work for a long time, and for many years I've shared the resources you created through Challenge Success with students and parents I partner with in the college admissions process. So let's start with you. Can you tell us what led you to the focus of your work, to writing your books, and to co-creating Challenge Success?
So what led me to this work was I actually started my career as a high school English teacher and was pretty frustrated by what I saw. I was thinking that the system wasn't working for my students. And even though this was a really good school in a well-to-do suburb in California, I was frustrated. My students were frustrated. And I went to graduate school to try to figure out how to help that. And in graduate school, I was urged by my mentors to look at schools that worked, that seemed to have it right. And I shadowed 5 high school students for a year at a very successful high school that had a great reputation. These kids were doing well in school. All of them had B averages or above. They were engaged with school. They seemed like it was, the system was working. And as I shadowed them over the year, I realized it really wasn't working. There were kids who were stressed out, who had ulcers. There were kids who were cheating. There were kids who were so worried about college and their future that they were pressed to really compromise their morals and their physical health. And that was sort of an alarm bell for me. And we turned the study into a book. And the person at the Stanford Health Center in charge of sort of well-being of kids read the book and called me into his office and said, we need to do something about this. And that was really the start of Challenge Success. It wasn't called Challenge Success back then. We sort of evolved. But way back in 2003, we decided that we needed to do an intervention because the kids at Stanford and at universities all over the US at that point in the early 2000s, we started to see some real mental health issues on college campuses. Kids were burnt out, kids were stressed, kids were not able to handle the work for a whole bunch of reasons. So that's what led me to do this work.
Fantastic. So it started really with an observation that you made when you were a teacher in the school system that kind of inspired you to then say, what can we do about this, right?
Yeah. And the problem was, and this is why the book is called Doing School, is these were great kids and they were getting good grades, and sort of on paper, they looked like this was working, right? But when you ask them or talk to them, they were just going through the motions. They were calling themselves little robo students. They weren't remembering or retaining the information. And there was this line that really pertains to what you do and what folks are listening to this podcast for, that Kevin said, look, you don't go to school to learn. You go to get the grades, right? To get into college, to get the high paying job, and then you get to happiness. And it was this really linear notion of what success means, and that high school is all about just getting into college, which is just all about getting to the next step. And nothing is really living in the moment. You're just doing these things, putting in your time for this future goal, which seemed very stressful and caused a lot of issues for the kids moving through the high school experience.
Yes, when a system does not have built into it the capacity to help students really be engaged in what they're doing, but kind of with this kind of future focus that is so tunnel vision, how can that system really be supporting those students, right? Yeah, yeah. Well, on that topic, before we get into college admissions, let's talk big picture about the most significant issues that middle and high school students are facing today in terms of well-being. Specifically, in June 2022, the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, reached out to Challenge Success and a handful of other organizations to help create a detailed action plan addressing the youth mental health crisis that has been exacerbated by the pandemic. Could you please tell us about the Surgeon General's request and Challenge Success's action plan to meet this situation?
So this was a big surprise to us, to have the Surgeon General reach out to Challenge Success. And it makes sense because the Surgeon General put out basically a call saying that we are in an unprecedented mental health crisis for adolescents right now. We knew that even before COVID and before the race reckoning in March 2020 and all sorts of climate issues that were happening in 2020 and 21, we knew that stress was really high for adolescents. We've been looking at this since 2003. And I think what finally happened is there was enough data to show that this was getting even worse. It was bad before 2020, and now it's even getting worse, with kids who were isolated, with all that was going on in the world, with the stress put on our young people. And so the Office of the Surgeon General is calling on a few nonprofits and a few for-profit companies to really help make a plan to address these mental health issues. And the way we fit in is we collect data. We have data on over 300,000 young people over time, and we look at some of the things that are causing them to be stressed. Interestingly enough, one of the top stressors that they cite in our data is college admissions and post-secondary options. What should I do after high school? Not just getting into college, but also other training programs, military decisions, etc. And so we, noticing that there is this stress, the Surgeon General has called on lots of us to help with some interventions as well. And so one of the things that we do in our plan is we work with schools directly. We work with young people directly. We put on parent education, kind of like, what this podcast is, to help people understand what to look for, how to address it, and how to make changes. And specifically, we work with schools to make changes to help kids both with mental health and physical health, and really transform the student experience so that they're excited and engaged and not just doing school.
What are the kind of specific things that you think are going to be most important to help address this mental health crisis, and particularly initiatives that Challenge Success is going to be more and more involved in over the next couple of years?
So that's a great question. One of the things that we know is really effective when it comes to dealing with mental health is sleep. So I'll just give you an example of one of the things that we will do with schools. We will encourage schools to have later start times and to change their schedule and to change their homework policies around to allow adolescents to get more sleep. So much so that it now in the state of California, some of our data was used to actually make it a state law that no high school can start before 8:30 in the morning. So our research encourages changes on all levels, but then in the actual schools themselves, we work to change policies and practices like the schedule, like sleep education, like focusing on social emotional learning, like creating wellness centers at the school, looking at overload, trying to reduce the stress and really make it much more about what we would call real engagement, where you're affectively, you're enjoying what you learn, you're behaviorally engaged, you're doing the work, and you're cognitively engaged. You see the meaning and the purpose in it.
Is there something that students and parents could access to be able to contact their own schools and encourage the administration and the decision makers to start to move in this direction?
Absolutely. So what we encourage everyone to do, first of all, is to go visit our website, www.challengesuccess.org. We have a ton of free resources on there for families to use, tools that even if your school's not making these changes, you can make changes at home. We have a scheduling tool, right? What classes make sense? It's not just take the most AP classes known to man. It's not just load up on a ton of extracurriculars, right? What makes sense for you, given the fact that every adolescent needs between 8 and 10 hours of sleep, needs to have time for chores, family obligations, paid work, if that's something that is part of your schedule. How do you fit that all in a way that makes sense and will allow you to really dive deep in your education and not just kind of go through the motions and do school? So we have free resources like that on our website. We have something very important, I think, for kids and parents to read on our website, which is our white paper on college admissions, which is all about finding a healthy fit, which we can talk about more. But if you want to get your school involved, we would welcome that. And you can go to our website as well and look up how to get your school involved with the Challenge Success program, invite them to come to a conference or one of our public workshops to just plant a seed that this might be something that they want to do, is to work more closely with us as a program.
Wonderful. I will be posting your website in the comments under the video, so families will have access to that right away. I wanted to ask you next, we know that access to college is a real problem right now. We know that it's more difficult for low income or marginalized families. Apart from that very, very important issue, what do you think the main challenges are for students and parents planning for and applying to college today?
It's a great question. I think there's something that we call college knowledge in the field, and that is understanding how the process of college admissions works. And I think we've seen so many changes in colleges that even if you're someone who went to college in the United States as a parent, 10, 15, 20 years ago, things have really been changing, partly because of COVID and March 2020, but just partly because things have evolved and you might not be aware of it. So I think really understanding what is needed right now that the colleges are expecting is really important. And I'll give you one example. One huge change in 2020 is that colleges could not require the SAT or the ACT to be taken because those testing centers were closed during the pandemic. So many of them had to revise their policies around standardized testing and allow it's called optional, right? Optional test or test blind admissions. And people don't necessarily understand what that means. And they don't know even where to look on a school's website to even find that out, a college's website. So there's a wonderful place to get educated about sort of what is needed for me to actually apply to this school. What types of classes are required in the state of California? We have certain requirements that if you don't pass those requirements, you're not eligible for the state colleges, right? So college knowledge, this knowledge about sort of what is entailed in the application. I think a lot of people don't realize that you can get fee waivers for applications, for testing. I think a lot of people don't know how to fill out the FAFSA, which is an important form as well for loans and whatnot. So there's that, but then there's also a really big misunderstanding that we see across the country, across socioeconomic status, which is where you go to college determines your life, right? And that is so different from maybe people who grew up in other countries, where maybe it is true that where you go to college or the score you receive on a pre-college test determines whether you're going to be a day laborer or an executive. But in the United States, and particularly you can read this in our white paper on the Challenge Success website, you can truly go to a community college, you can go to a trade school, you can delay and decide you want to go back to college when you're older. There are many, many paths to post-secondary education, and you have to figure out what is the right path for you given your circumstances. But there's nothing you can do. I use this example in my talks. You can actually fail out of high school in the United States. It's not fun. We don't encourage it. But if you fail out of high school, there is still a path for you to go to college, right? So I think a lot of people don't know this information, and it's really critical to get that college knowledge as you're going through this process.
Fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about if you, I'm kind of curious about this because this is a kind of pet peeve of mine, is that when we separate the idea of education and achievement from the idea of, well-being and integrating education into goals that are more maybe long-term, the separation, between kind of, do you think that it's possible to have our kids pursue, set the bar high, pursue excellence, and still find a way of nurturing their well-being for their long-term success?
Absolutely is my answer. Absolutely is the answer, because well-being and academic success and academic rigor can absolutely go together. And I think that's a big confusion that we see, is that you either have to be sleep deprived and totally stressed out and taking a million classes and doing a million things, or you can be healthy, but then you're not going to be able to be academically successful. That's a myth. Here's the other thing that we know. Our cognitive processes, along with our social and emotional processes, are neurologically intertwined. That means that you actually can't learn when you are stressed, when you don't feel like you belong, when you don't feel safe. You're actually impeded from doing your best work. So what we try to do is to help schools allow for maximum health, physical and mental health, make kids feel as safe and secure and as belong in that community as possible, with the right amount of load. There's this very big confusion that rigor equals load, right? You don't have to be doing 5 hours of homework in order to prove that you're smart, in order to have a really great educational experience every night. You can be doing less homework and still be learning a lot and preparing yourself academically for the rigors of college and life beyond. So this confusion that you have to choose between your health or your academic rigor, that's a myth. And we help people see that and allow it to happen together.
Thank you for explaining that in such a clear way. This is a message that I feel is so fundamental to support families through the college planning and application process. And what I'm excited about, for parents and students is to be able to tell them that if they go to your website, they can have access to the research that actually the studies that actually show that there are many more options than we think, right? And what it is that makes for long-term success. The idea of belonging, right, that is nurtured through mentorships with professors in college, through a student actively participating in the college community. This study, right, came out of some work that you did. Am I right?
So we spent a year looking at the research of sort of, does it matter where you go to college, right? How does the selectivity of the college that you go to impact your future? And it turns out that the study that you're mentioning, the Gallup-Purdue study of thriving, proves that there are people who take certain actions who are going to thrive better in after college. If you have a mentor, if you find a mentor in college, if you engage in extracurricular activities, it can be anything. It could be the bowling club, right? If you dive deep into learning, like you're doing an extended research project or writing a longer paper, these are things that we know allow kids to feel like they belong in school, in college, to have them really engage with their college education. And it's what, as you look at sort of long-term outcomes, helps people do better in jobs after college. And what's great about this study is it said it has nothing to do with how selective the school is. It has nothing to do with where the school ranks on the US News and World Report or other rankings. It's those kinds of experiences, finding a mentor, joining activities, doing a deep dive into academics, they can be found at any college, community colleges and four-year colleges. So it's literally not the school that makes a difference. It is the kid and what the kid does at that university that ultimately makes a difference in their success. And that's outlined in this paper that we wrote. It's very accessible. You can have, your high school student read it. And the paper is called A Fit Over Rankings. And the reason we decided to give it that title is because everyone has a fit over these rankings, which turns out to be completely baloney. If you look at how the rankings are done, it is not done scientifically. We break that down in our papers. It is ridiculous how these schools are ranked. And there's a little double meaning there. A fit over rankings is we want you to choose the right fit school for you and your interests and what you're hoping to do, as opposed to choosing a school based on its highest rankings. And people will say, well, wait a minute. We don't believe that. Don't people who go to the Ivy Leagues make more money than people who don't go to the Ivy Leagues, as an example? And the answer is no, that is actually not true, right? So it's not the selectivity of the school that is even tied to financial success, let alone thriving. It turns out that you can be financially successful, going just about any four-year college. Again, it's the kid, not the college, that makes for the success.
Right. And what better way to prepare that kid to thrive in college and to be able to do that than to give them that solid foundation of well-being, which includes some of the elements that you mentioned earlier. Now, along those lines, what do you think students and families can do to make the college planning and application process an empowering experience that lays the foundation for long-term well-being, rather than an exhausting ordeal that is short-sighted and ultimately doesn't really bring them what they want?
I think a common mistake we see is the minute someone gets into high school, the parents start talking about college, and everyone starts worrying about college and grades and test scores. And you're in high school to have a high school experience. And one one side aspect of it is that however you experience high school is going to help prepare you for college. It's not the reason you're in high school. And so one thing would be for parents to really take a breath, and for students to take a breath and really choose the path in high school that they want to have. Choose classes that you're excited about, not just because they have an AP or honors title. You're going to do better in classes that you're excited about. So it's actually going to help raise your GPA, right? If you do that. Choose extracurricular activities that make sense for you. Do not overload on extracurricular activities. Make sense for you given your home obligations, the chores that you do, your paid work obligations. You have to find the right balance. And we actually have a tool on our website. It's called a time management tool that is open. Anyone can get it. It's free on the website to help you think about how to find that balance and to build in time for exercise, for sleep, for family time, right? We actually have a mnemonic aid called PDF, playtime, downtime, family time. Every high school kid needs to have some downtime, some playtime, some time to spend with family and to get the sleep they need, along with taking some courses that excite them and get them to think critically. So how do you change that, get rid of that stress around college admissions? Delay the worry, really make smart choices as you're going through. And when the time comes, have a very open mind about the kind of schools that you're looking for. Really look for fit as opposed to just the schools that you happen to know the name of, or happen to be in your backyard, or happen to be top on the rankings.
Thank you. And tell me something. Your work empowers students and gives students a voice. I know that that's really central to what you do. What do you think, for example, students who are in this application process, juniors, seniors, what do you think that they can do in their own high school community to share this message? Like, are there ways that you would think would be really effective for them to help shift the conversation, because there's so much peer pressure around the college admissions process? Do you think that, from your experience with listening to students, what do you think some things they could do? What do you think some of those things are that they could do?
We have some amazing examples of what kids have done at their own schools to dial down the stress around college admissions. Little things like deciding that we're not going to publish the schools that every graduate is going to in the school newspaper. Automatically, that takes the pressure off of the kids who are embarrassed to say where they're going, or they don't know, or they're going to community college, which there shouldn't be any embarrassment around. There are students who have done campaigns that say, don't ask me where I'm going to school, ask me why I'm going to college. And they're poster campaigns where they show pictures of famous people and they say, guess where they went to college. And you flip up the page and you see, oh my gosh, I never heard of that school, right? There are campaigns that students have led where they do not talk about where they're applying to college. They don't have that time in class where you're checking your college admit. People check during class hours. The kids have made rules where the schools have said, we're not going to look at college admissions announcements during school hours. That takes a huge pressure off, right? We're not going to talk about the places that you've applied. That is something that you keep private. We're not going to talk about our SAT or ACT scores. When we make our final decision of where we're going, we're very happy to talk about it. But until then, that is a very private thing that's just between you and your parents, right? And the other thing that the kids have done, and some people like this, some people don't, is they have rejection walls where they literally just print out their rejection announcement from the computer and post it on a wall anonymously, right? They take off their name and just shows like, look, what a crazy system, how many rejections there are, and there's still going to be a college for you. So kind of taking that stigma out of the rejection, and throwing rejection parties, right? Finally, the last thing that I think has been really powerful is to have kids read the research, read like white papers like ours, and really debunk this idea that where you go to school determines your life path. And that can be done in small groups, that can be done with parents, like in a book club kind of model. And that can be done in bits and chunks in a school newspaper with some articles. So lots and lots of ways that kids can actually impact and bring that stress down in their own school.
That sounds to me like real empowerment. It's very exciting. I am so happy to be hearing you say these things. It just makes my heart happy. So I was going to ask you one last thing. For students who are just naturally high achieving, they're ambitious and they have kind of internally motivated reasons for wanting to end up at a school where the bar will be very high academically, where they will be surrounded by peers who are going to be very stimulating to them and classes that are going to be inspiring. What would you say to those kids? And I have a context in which I'm asking you this question because I have a method that I use with students to really help them think about their futures. But I'm just curious if you have a slightly different message for kids like that or not.
Not all colleges are created equal. And I don't mean that by saying that's why there's the rankings, right? There are certain colleges where there's a vibe, whether they're high in the rankings or not, where there's a vibe where kids are excited to learn, where you are taking classes that you want to take, where kids are staying up, talking in the laundry room about their philosophy course or their political science course. You can find those kind of classes with really motivated kids and really exciting conversations to be had almost anywhere, but you have to look. And so what I would say is, instead of kind of saying, I'm a go for it person and I'm going to just work my butt off and I want to be around other people who have worked their butt off and that's going to be the college for me, I want you to look for a school that matches your, what we call intellectual vitality at Stanford, right? That you are really excited about the humanities, maybe you get really excited about philosophy, you get really excited about having these deep conversations. You might want to look at schools that you've never heard of that really specialize in those kinds of disciplines, right? Let's say you are really excited about making and creating and engineering and science and whatnot. There are schools that you've never heard of that I can name, you can name, I'm sure, Angela, that might be the perfect place for you. So I want them to look beyond the name schools, still looking for those challenges that you talked about, that they want to be challenged, they want to be surrounded by these kind of people. They are all over the country in all sorts of schools.
That's a really important message. When I start working with students, when my counselors start working with students, we really talk about the abundance of options in this country. We are so fortunate. We are so fortunate to have such an abundance and to have places, this idea of fit, in some countries it would be a complete luxury. We have that. And not only that, but, so many different colleges that are offering merit aid and financial support to families. Not that it's, a perfect system, but all I'm saying, right, is that there are so many options.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful. So, please, if you could give us now your parting thoughts for parents and students embarking on the college admissions process, what would you say to them?
I think too many parents and students look at this process with dread. They look at it with fear. They look at it and say, this is going to take over our lives for the next 4 years. And what I would say is, this should be a really exciting time. in your child's life, in your family's life. This is where they figure out, what am I interested in? Or what do I think I'm interested in? And who are my people? And what kind of vibe do I want when I leave home for the first time and spend some time alone? And I think too often this process gets hijacked by this fear and this peer pressure and this parent pressure, and the grandparents come in and they put pressure, and this, what do you mean you're applying to such and such? I never heard of that. And oh, you must, not have done well, or oh, you must be super smart, or whatever it is, right? I would say, and this is really going to help you get into the college of your choice, take your own path. Be the most authentic you can be in the courses that you're choosing, in the extracurriculars that you're choosing to do, in how you write your essay. Don't compromise based on what you think someone else in some institution is going to be expecting of you. Be the best you that you can be. Challenge yourself. Really engage in the high school experience, and that will translate 100% over into the college application.
That is absolutely the message that if I could carry any message over, it would also be that one. To really help students. And, this is the basis of our work too, is just to help students find, align, discover, explore, and then naturally, as a radiance of that, or as a natural consequence, an organic kind of part of that process, to demonstrate at the end of high school, their journey, and to tell their story. So thank you so much for that. And really, thank you so much for being with us today, Denise. And what you've said is deeply inspiring to me, and I know it will be to families and to students, and I hope to schools as well. And so pivotal for the future of education and the future of our children. My wish for you is for your work to continue to bring benefit to young people in schools, in peer groups, at home, and empower all of us as parents, as counselors, as college admissions staff, to build the college admissions conversation around students' long-term success and well-being. Thank you so much, Denise. And please join us. This is for our viewers. Please join us next week when we will talk to Sabine Hurley, IB coordinator at an international school in Paris, France, Janine Manuel, and she will tell us how her staff and students are prioritizing a saner and more sustainable college admissions experience. Till then, I wish you all joy in your learning and in your life.